Do you go by?
Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. Today's episode is all about relationships and resiliency. I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Sam Asra, and he helps fathers save their relationship with their child. He's got an amazing story, and he's turned that story and pain into something very powerful, connecting with your child, making time for your kids, building a deeper connection, and I'm really excited for the conversation. So, Sam, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so I kind of alluded to you had a sort of a tumultuous upbringing. I did as well, and kind of talk about how you turn that pain into a something that you help people with today.
Yeah, so, as you mentioned, I had a harsh upbringing, and par particularly the situation with my family, my father. Unfortunately, I was raised in a very strict Middle Eastern home, and in that culture, my father was considered very severe case of, the physical and emotional abuse towards my mother and I being the eldest son, and the only son. So, as far as physicality, it's much more severe than, let's say, daughters. But in any case, you know, I really just didn't have a great relationship with him. I felt I could never talk to him. I felt like I was always walking on eggshells, and really the game was to not make him mad, and not make him frustrated, or, don't offend him, or don't, what I mean, really be careful about the words you say to him, because all those things could have repercussions. He could just be in a bad mood, and you could be totally normal and unfortunately receive, any sort of physical punishment, even if it's, not really warranted. In any case, throughout the years, as I grew up, um, it led up to ultimately a very, very ugly divorce. And that really sparked my inspiration into helping people, because what happened was, even after all of the stuff that he's done, uh, there was a chance of reconciliation, because I decided I wasn't going to talk to him, that I didn't want anything to do with him. And it was, 4 or 5 years went by post divorce that, you know, he started reconnecting with my siblings, and I still refused. And then there was just one sort of, I got basically pressured into going back just one time, meet with him. If you don't want to, that's fine, but just the idea of like you gave it one more final go around. And he could have salvaged the relationship had, he done some of the things that I actually teach in my program. And instead he uh, decided to not really apologize, not really take full ownership and full responsibility, not in the way he kind of apologized is kind of like backhanded, or like saying like we all made mistakes. I'm glad we could, turn the new chapter. And I was just so, like, I got so angry, because it's like, how is this my fault or my mother's fault, or like, who asked to be abused, like, how is this, and the weird thing is, he would admit it to my siblings behind, not to my face. He would admit to them that he was wrong, and he did so many bad things. It's like, why, where, what's preventing you from really owning up to it and coming face to face with the person you hurt? And so anyway, the all that whole story kind of inspired me, because it's a shame. I think a lot of fathers, like, they don't have a relationship with their children just because they don't know some of these things and how important it is. And yes, it might be damaging to your ego or pride, but you get to be in your son's life or child's life, whatever, whoever it is. And um, that is way more important, if you really think about long game, than, your ego or pride or need to be right, or win the argument or whatever else. Those are things that are less important. And it's a shame, because a lot of fathers suffer because of that. And so that inspired me to create a program and create a community where fathers can really share the struggle of now reconnecting with their children, learning how to communicate and dive deeper with their children. And it's a space where fathers can talk about this stuff because they don't get a space to talk about this. I mean, a lot of these fathers are in the business world, they have their coworkers, their business partners, but they don't really have people to talk to, really. Even their friends are not great. They're not experts in this kind of stuff. So at best, you're gonna vent to them, and not much comes out of it. So that's where I'm at with, this program. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's quite interesting. And so one thing I love to take um I love to take, love seeing people take pain and sorrow and create something powerful with it. And so one thing is talking about is this idea of this the inner child. What is the inner child? I've heard that term. It says connecting with your inner child. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does it mean? All of that.
Right. Personally, what inner child means to me is a couple things. One, maintaining your curiosity. As young children, we have a natural curiosity. We love to learn things. We love to explore things. Something catches our eye. We want to spend all day with it or look at it or play with it or whatever. And I think we lose that as we grow. We lose that because, a lot of times, let's say in school, they make learning incredibly, in some cases, incredibly boring or incredibly tedious. And yeah, and so it's like, well, why should I read? Why should I learn? Like, this stuff sucks, like, yeah, why do I have to wake up and do all this boring stuff? Whereas, and it's unfortunate because learning is fun. I rediscovered my love for learning, and I think that's maintaining your inner child. I look at Picasso when he talks about maintaining your inner child. He talks about that a lot, how, the difference between him and some other uh, people in his field or people in general, he managed to maintain some of that childlike wonder and childlike magic that as he grew older and he could still, tap into that. There's like endless creativity and endless amount of playfulness and curiosity in an inner child. Another thing, and you stop me if I'm gonna rant, but another thing I think inner child is going beyond the things that we are taught, because as we grow up we are taught shame. We are taught that being wrong is something to be ashamed about to some people, right? And this is a reason why my father had a hard time apologizing, because as he grew up he learned being wrong was means you're less of a man, or maybe your masculinity is at a jeopardy, or that that you're stupid or you're dumb, or he didn't want to feel those things because he associated being wrong with those things. And so that obviously is not the case. In order for you to learn, you have to be wrong. You have to fail. There's the only way you learn. You don't learn to walk without tumbling and falling 1,000 times, even as a kid. So as a kid, we have no idea that we should be ashamed that we just fell 500 times. We just get up. Like, we don't have the idea of like, oh, we fell, we should feel bad, or we stumbled, or we tripped, or we're still crawling and we're taking a while to walk. Maybe other kids have already started walking, we haven't started walking yet. So like, they have no idea of this, like, they don't compare themselves to anyone else. They're just like, you know what I mean? And they naturally learn, and that's it. And there's no sort of self-conscious thing that happens. But we start learning that as we grow older. We start comparing to each other. Some so and so gets better grades than us. So and so is gifted in this, and we're not gifted in this. Or so and so got the expensive gift, and we didn't get the expensive gift. And so we start learning those things. Inner child is really going back to the very beginning where we were at a clean slate. Easier said than done, but I think that's what we should strive for personally.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've always loved learning, and when I was younger I hated school, but I learned to love school because it did have some value for me. But I think it's like this thing with like spirituality and religion, and like we're all spiritual, and then but like religion is something man-made. It's like representations of the universe or God or whatever. And so the same thing
Right.
is like learning. We're like all of us are creative, but the society and media and the school system dumbs us down, and it makes us feel dumb. Just I mean, for no reason. And it's really school is really it's a really inefficient way of educating people. It's like good for educating people at scale, but if you want to really nurture like artists and genius and all these, it doesn't work for them. So, which I really love this idea of inner, so kind of talk about, sounds like with your relationship with your dad, it could be a cultural thing, Asian parents, Middle Eastern, different values. So one thing is talking about is how can listeners here build a deeper connection with their child? Like, what's the first step they can do? Have more time and energy, and just reconnecting with their child and fostering positive father or child relationships.
Well, that's a very loaded question. I mean, that's what, so so here's the thing, like it really depends on your situation, right? It depends like where are you at? Are you on talking terms with your child? Are you hanging out with your child? You haven't talked to your child in 10 years, 20 years? It just depends, but I think I can drop a few gems. That's it's really tough. I want to help as many people as possible, of course. But in our program, we really go A to Z, and of course, we can't do that in just in this time. But I've one thing I will say is something that I would love to see, and something you can take away today and use today, which is um, ask more questions when you talk to your child. You know, take a genuine interest in what they're doing. It sounds so simple, but you would be surprised how many fathers don't go deeper than, "Hey, son, how are you? Great, good. How was your day? Great. What'd you do today? Went to school. Good, good. Yeah, I'll have some homework. All right, well, I'll see you later. Bye, bye." You'd be surprised at what percent of conversations go that way. And a lot of times mom is like, "Well, how was school? Great. How's Mrs. Matthews? Yeah, she's great. Yeah, what was the grade you got on your math test? I remember that you were studying for it the other night. Well, how'd you do? How was it? Great. How is Jared? Yeah, Jared's great. We were hanging out." You see how already mom is more involved in kids' life versus dad, and there's no shame. Could be busy, could we whatever, could just not know. This is totally fine. This is why we do this. But keep a a record, right? Even if same thing you do with your business contacts, how you go to your network event, you type in here's Sam, he's an expert coach, he graduated from this, he likes the color blue, blah blah blah. And then you can follow up. It's the same thing. Do a CRM on your child. Okay, his best friend's name is this and this. He likes to do this. He has soccer practice on Thursdays. So now I never ask him, "What are you doing on Thursday?" I know he has soccer practice on Thursday, even though I don't take, maybe you don't take him, that's fine. But just saying, "Hey," then you text him or call him like 30 minutes before and say, "Good luck at practice, son. This is so simple. You don't This doesn't take any of your time, and it acknowledges the fact that you are involved in your child's life." That is a very, very powerful gem that I'm dropping for everyone that can do today. So you can just go and say, "I know you have a championship, this weekend. You do a video call. I want to wish you luck." I've heard kids saying that's more prized to them than any clothing you might have bought them or any item, any Xbox, any, whatever. Not saying those things are nice, but just the power of being, thought of, the power of, taking the time to write out a nice message. So yes, keep a log and then keep a log of the conversation. Okay, then you can follow up the next time, next week when you talk to your child. Okay, how was the science project? I know you said you were doing A, B, and C. Like, did you decide which one you were going with, and how did you decide? And then you can just keep asking questions with a genuine interest, and that will go a long way.
Yeah, I love that. And they say that your presence is more important than your presence because a lot of
Correct.
I grew up with a lot of like my friends growing up, a lot of their parents were doctors and lawyers, and they secretly hated them because they were never around. They can buy
Right.
them these fancy presents and things, but what they really wanted was just the time. And what do you do when so it's like when you're kids, you really want your parents involved, but then as you start to individuate and become your own, how do you navigate that? What is some good parenting techniques when your kids are teenagers and they kind of want to hang out with their friends or their boyfriend, girlfriend, or do things outside, without you?
Yeah, that can be a tough transition for some parents, especially if some parents have, been very, very involved. I think almost one thing I would say is expect this to start happening because as your child gets older, becomes an adult, has their own place, maybe has their own apartment, or goes to college for 9 months out of the year, et cetera, they will start having their own life. And so there's something to be said about making sure your life is full, even if you're a stay-at-home dad, mom, whatever, you still have, you know, hobbies you love doing. You still have maybe a passion you're pursuing, a side job or a main job, or maybe now is the time to go and start doing something you've always wanted to do. Not just focusing on why my son or daughter's not spending time with me, just acknowledging how, that is inevitable to change. The other thing I will say though is if you make sure that every time you see your child, it's a fantastic time, they will want to continue coming back.
Mm.
It's not an issue when every time I'm with dad, I feel like he always listens to me. I feel like I come to him to advice. I feel like I could vent to him. I could talk to him about stuff. Why wouldn't I want to see him all the time? Right? Same thing with mom, whoever, right? Why wouldn't I want to see them but if every time I come home, it's arguing, it's, why aren't you get the right grade? I'm disappointed in you, or like, I don't like that you're spending more time with them than me, like if that's the conversation, like, do you think I'd be very incentivized to keep coming home? You know what I mean? Um, and also, I think it depends on the personality. Some personalities, they love home, they love family. Some personalities, they want to be independent. So there's something to be said around adjusting for that, I think, because when you became an adult, it's the same thing. You had to fly away from the nest at some point. So that can be very challenging for some parents, for sure. But I
Yeah.
hope those tips help.
Yeah. The other question is, so I loved how you talked about, parenting, and have something that you are passionate, not just living for your kids, because when your kids go, it's like an empty nest, and then it's like, that's really tough. And I know a lot of parents who live for their kids, like that's their number one thing. And it's like I see it with like when they go off to college, man, they really struggle through that transition. What do you say when, like, for example, they're so like people are so traumatized from their childhoods that and they start to, either they're really selfish and it's all about them, or they say, I was so traumatized by my childhood growing up that I don't want my children to do the same thing and I don't want to have kids. Well, how do you address that?
Mm. And you're saying from the context of as a child, as a like a young adult or someone who's already a parent, like you're saying a young adult who might be traumatized that they don't want to have kids.
Yeah, so like someone, like, for example, just something, say somebody hypothetical, they grew up with abuse or dysfunction or alcoholism, whatever, addictions, and they were so traumatized by their childhood that when they become an adult, they're like, I don't want to have kids because I don't want them to live in this type of world, and their view of the world is so negative and so um adversarial that they just don't they're like, I don't want kids to live here, I don't like the way the world is going. How do you address that?
That's funny because that's something personally I have felt as well. Why should I have, kid? Especially I was also more concerned with me possibly even acting like a small fraction of how I grew up. Because your culture and how you grew up and your genetics, right? You might be predisposed to do this certain things that your father, your mother did as well, even if you're trying not to. Like, let's say, your father is very, very hot-headed. You might be calm, but you might have it still in you to be hot-headed if pushed hard enough, right? And with kids, you got to be very patient, so there's a fear of that too, which is interesting, like, potentially triggering the trauma through the hardship of having kids, and so um, I would say it's a lot of work on yourself, whether it's spiritually, whether it's professionals, like a therapy or whatever works for you is, going through a study or going through a course, really understanding how to be comfortable and managing yourself. And I think also as you get into relationships and you find someone who you think is going to be very nurturing, and you might not stick so hard on not having kids. You might start to see that there might be a bright future if I learn how to do this and if I prepare myself. And I think that's the approach, is if you can be proactive, preparing yourself mentally, emotionally, learning all you can learn about the subject, about, raising kids, about love, you can be confident that they're going to be happy and you're going to be successful in raising kids if you want kids. And also, if you don't want kids, that is totally okay. But don't let your trauma dictate for you if you want kids. Let you have a clear mind and say, you know what, kids aren't for me, which is totally fair. But yeah, that's what I would say. I'm still figuring that one out, so I'm not gonna pretend I have that
Yeah,
one.
it's really interesting. And I really enjoyed this conversation. How can people find out more about you and reach out to you, connect with you on social media and so on?
Sure. So I have a company called Fathers Connect. You can just type in Fathers space Connect, CONNECT, and then we'll come up and you can book a strategy call with me completely free, no high pressure sales pitch, no nothing. It's just for us to go through your situation and see how we can, some tips and some strategy and how to create deeper connection. And if you would like more help, then it's something that we can talk about. Another way you can find me, and personally me, my story, what I've done, you can Google Sam, SAM, space Asra, ASRA, and you'll find tons of other publications about me and things that I've done as well. So really, really appreciate you having me, Chris. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the conversation. And for the audience out there, please give Sam a like and follow on socials. Check out his work. Do amazing things. And with that, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.